Okay, so we've seen a lot of examples, but what is the difference? We've been talking about animatronics and puppets, or actually viewing a lot of it, but is there a difference? Absolutely. A puppet is usually a completely inanimate object that's deriving its performance solely from human puppeteers, using hands, rods, strings, or other non-machined elements. What does that mean? Well, this is a dog playing piano. You may recognize him. His name is Ralph, and he's from the Muppets. And although he's very, very good at playing piano for a dog, he can only do what the human with the hand up his back will tell him to do. Basically twist, turn his head, open his mouth, right? He's a puppet. On the other hand, Falkor, this dog, if you've recognized him, he's from a movie called The Neverending Story. He is another much creepier dog, but he, on the other hand, is a dog that may very well have people inside him to motivate his movements around, but he also possesses a fair degree of mechanics that simulate his blinking, his tongue animation, his nose, his ear movement, muscle twitches, and so forth. Because of these machined elements inside of him, these mechanical elements, he is a animatronic. Okay, so mechanical animatronics can indeed have human puppeteers around them, or even in them, in the case of, say, Jabba the Hutt. It doesn't make them a puppet. Okay, as soon as you introduce mechanics to it, animatronic. A puppet becomes an animatronic. So why are they special effects? Well, obviously they're special effects because they're on set with the actors during principal photography. It's a huge advantage to them. They love having them there. They can react and you know, it's much easier to react to a humongous animatronic T-Rex, you know, smashing into your Jeep than it is to pretend that there's a big T-Rex smashing into your Jeep. So it's a huge advantage for the actors. And of course, it's a huge advantage for the post-processing department because what you've captured is done. It's in camera. It's already there on set, and you don't have to go back and do a whole lot of roto and camera tracking and modeling and texturing and lighting and rigging and blah, 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 right? So let's go back up in time a little bit and figure out where these things came from because they have a really rich, fun history. History of animatronics actually begins with clockmakers. And many years ago, advanced mechanical clocks were built in Europe, which featured animated characters. Characters moved and were hidden and displayed in time when the clock chimed or in conjunction with the sounds of the clock, right? So like modern animatronics, a character movement was set to a specific time code and sound was introduced to attract your attention. To say, hey, look at me, I'm doing something that you want to be interested in. Clockmakers use these characters to tell a story. Many of these clocks are very, very large and usually were in the town center. They took a long time to build. They're very expensive. The towns were very proud of these. Here is a clock, for example. This is the Prague Astronomical Clock. Still survives today. And this clock was actually built in 1410. Okay, and animated figures were actually added to the clock around the 1600s, right? So around the Renaissance. And there's four figures that flank the clock, and they're set into motion. Here are the four figures way back there, and I'll do a close-up so you can see what they're doing. Here's a couple more characters back there, of course. But we're talking about these four right up there. These four characters, they kick off their action. They're set into motion on the hour. And they represent four things that were actually despised of at the time of the clock's making. Now, they're surrounded by some protection, you know, for, you know, birds and, you know, the odd thrown rock or who knows. But anyway, the first two, from the left to the right in the photograph, the first character is Vanity. And Vanity is represented by a figure admiring himself in the mirror, okay? That was looked down upon in the time. Next, the miser right over here is holding a bag of gold, so he represents greed. On the other side of the clock, okay, stands Death right here, okay? And a skeleton that strikes the time upon the hour, okay? And finally, there is a figure representing, right over here, lust and earthly pleasures. He seems to have a precursor to a guitar, probably a lute or something. On the hour, the skeleton rings the bell, and immediately all the other figures begin shaking their heads side to side, signifying their unreadiness to go. Okay? So, a lot of fun, pretty fun clock. Fast forward about 100 years, and you're in the dark recesses of the Black Forest in South Germany. Now, I didn't really have a picture of the Black Forest, so ignore these hobbits. They're on a mission, and they have something busy to go do. But pay no attention to dwarves. German clock makers created a more affordable form of animatronics that were actually purchased from homes from this area. The cuckoo clock. Now, the cuckoo clock, the design of the cuckoo clock introduced at least one mechanical character, such as a bird or an irate woman hitting her husband with a rolling pin or something, which performed a show, popped out among specific times. And there's a little bird and come out and, cuckoo. And I think that's a Disney one because, those are obviously Mickey's feet, and there he is over there. So in the modern era, these are basically pre-modern animatronics, really. And so in the modern area, not surprisingly, the modern area of animatronics was kickstarted by one of the biggest animation and technology innovators of all time. And his name is, of course, Walter Elias Disney. And Disney saw animatronics as a novelty that would attract visitors to the World's Fair back in 1964. So this is actually before... it was, Disneyland was built in 55. Disney World down in Florida came online around 72-ish or something like that. At the World's Fair was a great place to kind of test out animatronics or new exhibits and new attractions, stuff like that. And so he wanted to attract visitors to the World's Fair displays and later his movies and his theme parks. And he also recognized that the figures, the animatronics, could actually replace actors and actresses in repetitive shows, giving the audiences a consistent show that was almost always on schedule. Imagine if every time you went through the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, the actors got more and more tired as the day goes on, and pretty soon at the end of the day, they're not interested in chasing each other at all. They're pretty beat. They just want to go home, right? Have a beer or something. It's definitely an inconsistent show, inconsistent performance. Animatronics, not a problem. They're going to keep doing exactly what they do unless they break down, but they're always going to be doing the performance exactly. And as was typical with Walt Disney, he pushed the limits of technology at a time in order to achieve his vision. At the 1964 World's Fair, at the Illinois Pavilion specifically, a lifelike President Abraham Lincoln recited his famous speeches in Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln. Here are pictures of the amazing architecture of the World's Fair. This was actually in Queens, New York, Flushing, New York, and you could see back here, this is Shea Stadium where the Mets play, what it used to look like. Some of you may recognize some of this location from some movies back in the day. You may also recognize this as a postcard from the World's Fair. And these, of course, are the famous hidden in plain sight flying saucers that they built. Obviously, they weren't built as flying saucers for the World Fair, but the movie Men in Black decided to utilize that architecture that was actually left over because once you build it and it just looks amazing, why tear it down, right? The architecture of the fair was actually conceived as a futuristic, dealing with the space age and the atomic age. And that's where, of course, the spaceships and the spaceship crashes through. Here are some shots of Abraham Lincoln. The Abraham Lincoln animatronic is actually the first full-body human animatronic in history. Sophisticated viewers of today, of course, may see that the animation is somewhat stilted and a little bit stiff due to the nature of the technology at the time. Viewers of the day were just absolutely astounded by what they had seen. Let's take a look at this first animatronic human form, Abraham Lincoln, in action.
The world has never had a good definition of the word liberty. And the American people just now are much in want of one. We all declare for liberty, But in using the same word, we do not all mean the same thing. What constitutes the bulwark of our liberty and independence? It is not our frowning battlements, our bristling seacoasts. These are not our reliance against tyranny. Our reliance is in the love of liberty, which God has planted in our bosoms. Our defense is in the preservation of the spirit which prizes liberty as the heritage of all men, in all lands, everywhere. Destroy this spirit, and you have planted the seeds of despotism around your own doors. At what point shall we expect the approach of danger? By what means shall we fortify against it? Shall we expect some transatlantic military giant to step the ocean and crush us with a blow? Never. All the armies of Europe, Asia, and Africa combined could not by force take a drink from the Ohio or make a track on the Blue Ridge in a trial of 1,000 years. At what point, then, is the approach of danger to be expected? I answer, if it ever reach us, it must spring from amongst us. It cannot come from abroad. If destruction be our lot, we ourselves must be its author and finisher. As a nation of free men, we must live through all times or die by suicide. Neither let us be slandered from our duty by false accusations against us, nor frightened from it by the menaces of destruction to the government, nor of dungeons to ourselves. Let us have faith that right makes might. And in that faith, let us to the end dare to do our duty as we understand it.